afternoon. My name is Zach Luno, and my final project topic was on Greece. Greece, beautiful locations and cheap travel. Alright, my first set of sources that we're going to talk about is my web sources. I had come across a couple different sources. One of them is just a non-commercial source done by a student at MIT who is from Greece and made up his own travel to Greece webpage. Second source is through Nordic Mat, which is this online resource done by an individual that travels the world. His big deal was traveling the world on a less than a $50 budget. So that was interesting, but of course he's also trying to get you to buy his stuff, but he still has some pretty good input on his website. And then the last resource for my web page resources, was the U.S. Passports and International Travel, which is through the U.S. Department of State. So when you come across, if you plan on traveling abroad, or even within the United States, you can get on there and look at some of the travel warnings that might be in certain areas. If the country you're going to is recently had some issues with terrorism, or in the midst of a civil war, or there's a travel advisor against going to a certain country, that's where you'd be able to look it up. Our second set of sources here are reference sources. These are your more along the lines of encyclopedia type resources. In fact, a couple of them actually are encyclopedias. The first is the Encyclopedia Britannica, talking about Greece. Second one is the Statesman's Yearbook Online, also obviously talking about Greece, our topic here. And then the World Almanac and Facts about Greece. All three of these are going to be very dry, if you will, subject references. I'm going to give you the bare bones facts about the country, its current population at the time that the encyclopedia or web page was last updated, economy, status, things like this. These is going to be very broad overview, dry statistics of the country, in this case Greece, that we will be looking at going to. Alright, our third set of resources are journal and newspaper sources. Two of these are scholarly sources that are actually published in medical journals about international travel and medicine and what do you call them? Infectious diseases. The first one was actually written for the 2011 Special Olympics. By a couple of doctors in Greece who deals with their specialties, or they're part of the travel department of traveling and stuff like that in Greece, and they wrote an article about the infectious diseases that can be acquired while doing international traveling. And also my third resource here, if you notice, actually has a couple of the same doctors also within that scholarly journal, and they are talking about more of the vaccinations you would need to conduct international travel. So that might be a little bit more better of a resource if you are not up to date on your vaccinations. Or you're not exactly sure what kind of diseases you should be prepared for and how to fight against it. You can look into those. Both of those are they only require really a high school level to read, high school education level to read, but they do kind of get into the nitty gritty on some of the infectious diseases and stuff, so it can be a little bit dry and difficult to understand at times. And then my third resource, the one actually in the middle here, is Traveling to Greece, What You Need to Know, by the Irish, which was a newspaper article published in the Irish Times. This one was very just your normal newspaper articles, not a scholarly article, but it definitely had some good tips and tricks and information that would help on traveling to Greece. And it's a fairly up-to-date source, and it was published in 2015, so not too old, but at the same time it is a newspaper article, it's not a scholarly article, so it's probably going to have a little bit more opinion in there than it would be if it was like a peer-reviewed article. Alright. And my last set of sources here are my actual hard book sources. These are the ones I actually pulled out of the library. The first one, Travels in Northern Greece, done by a lady that's lived in Greece, excuse me, for more than half her life. She's a published journalist and author, and she wrote a neat little travel book. It's published in 2006, so it's a little bit old, but not ridiculously old. The next book, though, I thought it was a very good book for some basic information on the Greek islands. It is dated a little bit. It was published in 1978, but obviously a lot of the historical ruins and major tourist attractions that he talks about in this book are still there. Kind of a rough breakdown of the islands themselves and where things are and stuff like that, for the most part, is still correct. So that could definitely still be used, just not for anything that you would really need up-to-date information on. And of course, what resources would we have without actually looking at the Complete Idiot's Guide to something? I wasn't even aware they actually had a Complete Idiot's Guide to Ancient Greece, but they do. And within this book, I'd say about 75 to 80% of it is made for actual just looking at ancient Greece and its history. But the last couple of chapters are actually dealing with some of the dealing with modern Greece and some of the historical places for Greece and traveling within Greece itself. So you actually do have, you can use this as a resource for traveling within Greece and some of the historical places and ruins and things like that that you could look at while in Greece. Okay, then we're going to look at some of the some of the databases that I used for looking things up. I did use ProQuest on a couple occasions. ProQuest Central I used to locate, that's periodicals. Within that periodicals is also journal articles, peer-reviewed journals, stuff like that. It's still considered periodical. The ProQuest newsstand was able to find a couple of the newspaper articles. The one that I put within my bibliography is how I found that, was through ProQuest newsstand. ProQuest is very ProQuest itself as a database is very broad. Covers a little bit of everything. The database is so large, I actually do, like you can see here, break it down into specific sections of the database, like ProQuest Central, ProQuest Newsstand. Alright, so while we got some time left, we're going to try to do a little bit of a quick search. Alright. Thank you. There it is. Okay, so we got ProQuest Central brought up. Like I said before, this is more along the lines of a locating periodicals. So, let's see. Alright, within this database you do have, I apologize, but trying to catch up with my notes here. Okay, one of the things about ProQuest is you have to pay to access it. So for students of UNCW, we do automatically have access logging in with our information, our password. But people outside of the college or people outside of an educational institution would have to pay to access this. Alright, so let's do a sample search here. Since this is ProQuest Central, what I'm going to do, excuse me, I'm going to see what they come up with. I just want to see what they come up with for an NC governor's race, see if we come up with anything. come upon a problem here. I apologize. Okay. Okay. Whew. Alright. Now we just typed in randomly without really specifying anything. We're just doing a basic search for North Carolina governor's race. And as you can tell, we came up with 842 results, all for periodicals, for both scholarly articles and, as you see here, like Tribune Business News, just newspaper articles. Okay. Now with that, we can obviously take some information and narrow it down. Right here on the left side, you actually have a whole section that says narrow results. And you can come down here, you have a date range you can set, so you can specify a certain date and limit your newspaper articles and journal articles based just on date. You do newspapers, wire feeds, historical journals, trade journals, magazines, different options like that to also limit the amount of information you receive to make it a little bit more specific. So let's see, as far as the information presented, when you do look it up, it comes up as an abstract. Because these are journal articles, you are allowed, you can view the full text. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you have a great day. And remember, Greece, beautiful locations, cheap travel.